labyrinthine film narrative that we're all living through, right, is actually, I think, intentionally being blurred between what we're presented with on the news media screens across our nation and what we see in film theaters and what we experience with our day-to-day lives outside of that synthetic reality. And what's happening, I think, is that we're intentionally having the lines of reality and fiction blurred. We're intentionally having that threshold removed to put us in a sort of dreamlike state where we're perpetually wondering about what's real and what's not, putting us off balance, getting us off guard. That's really the psyop that we're under, that the establishment propagates and puts into our minds, that the establishment wants us to be so shaken, like Nicholas or like Michael Douglas in the film, or like Tom Cruise, that we're willing then to accept whatever the establishment gives us, right? So 9/11, ISIS, these constant barrage attacks on our psyche from the mass media, that's intended to traumatize us. And all the three protagonists in tonight's films that we've looked at were traumatized. What happens when you're traumatized? Well, trauma puts you in a state of emotional reaction, right? Your cognitive faculties shut down, your reason shuts down, and you become a reactionary. You just react to the situation or the scenario, whatever it is, and you don't think rationally. And that's what happened at 9/11, right? That false flag scenario was a psyop intended to attack the mass psyche, to manipulate archetypes, to get us to chant hate, hate, hate at whatever image of boogeyman was put across the screens in our nation. All the screens that we stare at throughout our days as if they were obelisks in 2001 that are going to lead us into infinity and beyond, when in fact they are the projections of synthetic reality. All the screens that we stare at all day. And I'm speaking particularly here of the visual screens, right? Not so much audio. You're listening to audio that hopefully helps you decode and deconstruct the synthetica that you're fed through the visual screens. So keep in mind Bill Harford in Eyes Wide Shut. Keep in mind Nicholas Earth in The Magus. Keep in mind Nicholas Van Ort in The Game. And remember that just as these traumatized persons in the films and in the stories underwent a process of death and rebirth, we all continually go through a process of death and rebirth. In a natural sense, when we go to sleep and wake up, we experience a kind of death and rebirth. When we go through traumatic events in our lives, we experience a death and rebirth in our psyche. Sometimes that can split our psyche and cause us to have a double think disassociation in our psyche. And that's what the establishment would like to cause us to have, so that we are then able to be programmed with double think. It's a very profound principle that Eric Blair George Orwell was outlining in 1984, was that notion of making us double-minded to where we can hold in our heads two completely contradictory notions at the same time. Meanwhile, we actually kind of know deep down in our heart of hearts, that two contradictory notions in our head cannot be both true at the same time. The establishment can't be good and at the same time consistently lying to us. We can't be like an abused wife, in a scenario where she continually goes back to the husband that beats her, just because she has some hope that down the line her husband will stop one day. And in the same way, we as the populace cannot be consistently giving over our sovereignty, our reason, our thought, our personal privacy to the establishment that seeks to traumatize us consistently on a non-stop basis, especially through mass media, whether it's the fictional films of Hollywood or the fictional films of 9/11 in mass media, the fictional storylines of the Boston bombing, the Hollywood blockbuster of Sandy Hook. You follow me?